I'm here today because we are hearing very frightening stories coming out of the Kachin territory.
Ante Sydney myo Australia mungdan go na ante Wunpawng amyo ni dani ante mungdan go ante buga go pian nai the ante nang the Australia mungdan go ngai msha ni je na ma tu buga go pian nai yok msa yong phe ante nang go ngun sam jo na re.
June of this year, the Burmese military launches an all-out assault on the Kachin people. Under the excuse of a war against the KIA, the Burmese military have engaged in appalling atrocities against the Kachin people. Systematic rape, ethnic cleansing, displaced people, murder and torture. These are stock in trade for the Burmese military, but they are an action that no people, no individual should ever have to suffer. The Burmese military have decided to go to war. It may be related to the Mystone hydroelectric dam. It may be related to development potential within the Kachin state. We know it will be related to something which is of profit to the leaders of the Burmese military. It doesn't really matter why they've done it. What matters is that they are doing it. What matters is that Kachin girls, Kachin women, Kachin men, Kachin boys are being treated like cattle, are having their lives shattered and destroyed, are having their human rights systematically abused by a military that claims to be involved in democratisation. What we also know is right now there is a military build-up outside the city of Lisa with 100,000 or more residents. Given the Burmese military's characteristic targeting of civilians, and particularly in this war against the Kachin, given that there are 100,000 civilians or more inside Lisa, we sit on the cusp of an even greater humanitarian disaster. A disaster that will not only add to the 30,000 internally displaced people, but will add to the appalling toll of human life lost and human life destroyed. This is no time for any government that claims moral authority to turn their back on the plight of the Kachin people. This is the time that the Australian government should stand up and say very directly to the Burmese government and to the Chinese government that supports them that it is time to desist. This is the moment in history when the Burmese military backs off. It is the time when the Australian government says to the civilian and the military leaders of Burma, get out of Kachin, get out of the war that will stand between you and becoming part of the international community. Australia needs to make it absolutely clear to the Burmese leaders that there will be no foreign investment in Burma, in any part of Burma, as long as wars like this continue, as long as civilians are targeted, as long as human rights are treated with scant disregard. Australia needs to say to Burma, yes, you got the leadership of ASEAN, but that's only a small step back into the international community. And a much bigger barrier is your disregard of human rights in the Kachin state. A much bigger barrier is the trashing of your international reputation, which we, Australia, will engage in if you don't stop immediately, in particular if you don't pull your troops back from Lisa. This is the time for the Australian government to say to the Burmese government, the very first thing you should do is get your troops out of Lisa and out of the Kachin territory. But then you must allow aid to flow. You must allow aid from Australia and from the international community to get to the IDPs, to get to the other people whose livelihoods have been destroyed by the military onslaught. Get to those people and help them rebuild their lives. There's no compensation for losing your home. There's no compensation for being raped. There's no compensation for losing a brother or a sister. However, there is a way forward for the Kachin state and a way forward for all of Burma. We here today are calling on the Australian government not to turn their backs on the people of Kachin, not to turn their backs on the plight of the young women and the young men who are facing a very grim future, but to be there to fulfil our international obligations and to make sure that we say to the Burmese government, to the Burmese military and to the international community, human rights are non-negotiable. Peace is non-negotiable. National reconciliation within Burma is non-negotiable. Thank you so much for being here today. I assure you that when Parliament sits again next year, I'll be raising this issue in Parliament. This afternoon, my office will be writing to Stephen Smith to make it absolutely clear the Greens want instant action, not to wait around, not for the international niceties, but to make the statements that begin the process of moving the Burmese military out of the Kachin state. Thank you very much for being here, and rest assured that all right-thinking Australians stand with you in your fight for human rights. Thank you.